Hello and welcome to the Stompcast, a Guild Wars 2 PvP-centric podcast. My name is Nord from GuildWarsInsider.com, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Cigs of Team Paradigm. How's it going, Cigs?
Always excellent, Nord.
Alright, we also have two special guests on the show today. Our first one fills our affirmative action quotas for both nationality and underplayed class. We have Team Paradigm's own Xeph the Mesmer. How's it going, sir?
Hello, good to be here.
Also on the show today, we have Phantaram. Phantaram's team formerly played under the name Hoop Dreams, but they were recently picked up by Team Paradigm to be their North American squad. How's it going, sir?
Pretty good. How about you?
Well, I'm doing awesome, or at least I'm going to try to fake it for the next hour or so. A couple things we want to touch on before we get the show started. First off, a big thank you to all of our listeners. We received overwhelmingly positive reviews on our first episode, and it really made us feel warm and fuzzy inside. Although if you did say some negative shit, screw you. If you have anything awesome to say, be it feedback, comments, suggestions, or even if you have some pictures or poodle you want to send us, feel free to email me at thestompcast@gmail.com. Lastly, if we mention any websites, articles, or interviews in the cast, you will more than likely find the actual links to that content in our show notes, wherever those might be. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on. A couple things we want to take a look at here. On the Major League Gaming Pro Circuit feedback forums, there's currently a thread suggesting that Guild Wars 2 is added to next season's circuit for their pro gaming circuit, essentially. The thread's only been around since July 29th, but it's already up to just shy of 6,000 votes, or at least that's what it was at last time I checked. If you're looking to promote Guild Wars 2 as an esport, but you're a lazy piece of shit, it's not a bad way to contribute and get your voice heard. All right, another bit of news here. The recent launch of Dragon Arena. It's an offshoot of the Guild Wars 2 fan site Dragon Season. They're currently aiming to be a tournament and league hosting platform for Guild Wars 2. The big news being, though, that they're actually looking to host a Guild Wars 2 tournament just shortly after launch, and there is the potential for winning real-life and in-game swag. So if you are on a competitive team and it's relevant to your interests, then I would head over to their website and sign up. All right, and one last bit of news. Recently, Curse.com sat down with ArenaNet for a mostly PvP-orientated interview. To be honest, a lot of this was a rehash of things that we've already heard. First on the list, tournaments will indeed be region-locked, meaning that if you play on a European server, you'll not be able to take part in North American tournaments and vice versa. One thing that comes to mind, a couple teams out there are already going to be running two teams, one for NA and one for EU, Team Paradigm being one of those teams. That said, how do you guys feel about this announcement?
We're not really looking at it being a real big deal for us. Like you said, we've got an NA team, we've got an EU team, and then at the same time, with it just being region locked, that's really not a huge restriction. You can transfer between regions if you so desire. I anticipate we'll probably be doing that a little bit more than we'd like to, but I'm not really seeing it being a big problem at all. It's a lot better than other games that we've played where it's server locked and you've got to transfer servers within the same region.
All right, and a couple other things that I said that were interesting in the interview as well. ArenaNet mentioned that they use existing games as a model for esports development, and then if you walk through their office on any given day, you'll see esports streams just playing the entire time. They said they'll be using that as well as their experience from Guild Wars 1 and developing Guild Wars 2 as an esport. So I guess it's kind of comforting to know that they aren't just kind of winging it and kind of just playing it by ear and doing it their own way.
I mean, we haven't seen their spectator client yet. They've talked about a spectator client. I think they know the importance of a spectator client. But I have confidence in the ArenaNet developers. They made a really good PvP game with Guild Wars 1, and I don't expect anything less from Guild Wars 2. And now, where we are at in Guild Wars 2 days compared to Guild Wars 1 days, they've got a lot of models to go off of, such as League of Legends or, any of the other really popular esports like StarCraft, to where they've got good spectator clients. They know what they need. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. They're actually kind of at a little bit of an advantage. Esports is still in its infancy, but we're at least progressed to the point where people have a model to go off of because certain games have been very successful.
All right, and ArenaNet also mentioned that they hope that there will be professional Guild Wars 2 players, basically players that are able to support themselves, basically earning money from streaming and tournaments alone. I guess obviously for you guys, since you're all playing on a competitive teams, I guess it's kind of comforting, I guess. Do you guys think that's going to get to the level to where you'll be able to support yourselves completely off the game?
I believe that will be difficult. a lot of video games have been out there, and a lot of people have tried to do it. Few have been successful. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what ArenaNet has in store. It'll depend on how much the prize pools are in tournaments and how many tournaments are going to be going on at any one time. So it'll be difficult to gauge at this time, but I think we'll get a more accurate read on that once we see how many tournaments and how much money ArenaNet is willing to put on the line.
And do you plan on streaming all the time, Xeph?
Personally, yeah, I do plan on streaming, but I don't really plan on supporting myself off the video game. I mean, for me, it's more about the competition and not the money. I believe that's different for other team members, but personally speaking, I am not looking to make a living off Guild Wars.
Are you going to be streaming Cigs?
I may or may not stream. I'm not really too big into that.
Phantaram, you told me before that you plan on streaming all the time. So you're looking to actually make money from streaming?
Yeah, that'd be super nice. That's the plan, really. And like StarCraft 2 players like Destiny, they talk about in the past how instead of going to tournaments, they could just sit home and stream and make more money, and it's less risky. So I think most people that make a living off playing video games just do it from streaming, really.
I've actually heard that a lot. Players from other games saying they actually lose money by taking place in online tournaments just because like they can't stream for some of them, or going to LAN tournaments, they can't actually stream the event, so they actually make less money from winning a tournament than they would if they just stayed home and streamed.
That's also a really small percentage of players. Like when we're talking about players on the level of Destiny, and that's you know what I mean. Like that's like such a very, very small percentage of players. I mean, I'm not really. I don't think it's really appropriate to assume that you're going to live off of a video game. I think it'd be really nice if it works out, but I don't think anybody's really, at least in our organization, sitting there trying to say I'm absolutely going to live off of Guild Wars 2. I mean, a lot of people would like to, but I don't think anybody's putting all their eggs in that basket. Not that it's not doable, but it is just such a small percentage of players that can actually make a complete living off of video games. It's really not. I don't think it's that big of a deal, you know?
Well, hopefully people are keeping themselves a little bit grounded, because I think living off of a game that just came out is a little far-fetched. So hopefully everyone's a little level-headed.
I believe that a lot of players are going to attempt to do that at the beginning, and you're going to see a lot of streams come up, and a lot of people rush to release videos and, you know, try and gain that popularity. And eventually, I would say, like 97% of that will be weeded out, and you'll have the 5 or 4 people that will manage to make a living off it, or, well, a decent income, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I saw a lot of teams mention they want to do gaming houses like right at launch, and I kind of just rolled my eyes.
Yeah, that's a pretty expensive venture. I mean, a gaming house is a bit of a step. I don't think people are really thinking about how much actually goes into these things.
Maybe a gaming house where everyone works like shifts at Circle K, and then they come home and play video games together. I don't know about, you know, supporting themselves completely off the game.
Xeph, we can be register buddies.
Work on your teamwork skills.
Well, I mean,
I need a price check.
Dude, you were so slow with the price gun. You're so slow.
One last thing they touched on in the interview is the ranking, or a ranking system being implemented. They threw out their old classic line of when it's ready or whatnot. But do you guys want to see like a solo or duo queue system with an actual elo system attached to it?
Yeah, I think I would love that, actually, because I think half the reason League has so many viewers on their streams is because a lot of players don't have a team to play with, so they just spam solo queue all day. But they still feel like they're in the scene, you know, so they just play solo queue and then watch the streams. And I think that's a huge part of why League is so successful.
Do you want to see solo or duo queue? Like, what's the max amount of players you want to see in a match from the same team?
That's a good question. I think solo would be good to start off with, and then I could just try to see if duo could work after that. I don't know.
Do you think
internally test that kind of stuff?
Do you think like one player in Guild Wars 2 is more effective than one player in League of Legends, or is it about even?
It kind of depends on what role they're playing. Like if they're a roamer, glass cannon spec, then they could greatly impact the game. But if you're just a bunker build, you're only affecting one node. So it depends on who the best player on the team in solo queue is playing, which might result in everybody playing the roaming glass cannon build, and that would yeah, it's kind of awkward. I don't know if it would work as well as League, but it's still important, I think.
Do you guys want to see like a team-based ELO as well?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
How would that work though?
I don't even want to see ELO, period. I don't want to see ratings. I think it should just be tournament-based. Maybe I'm the only person in the world that feels this way, but I really hate grinding and sitting on ratings. That is the most annoying thing ever. It's like, oh, well, we're already at this rating, so we're qualified for this, so we don't have to do anything now. Or, if you're a new player coming in, you're like, oh, well, I'm only this rating, I need to get to this rating, and then it just becomes some sort of like rating pissing match, whereas if it's just tournament based, it's like, oh, hey, we're better than you. Okay, well then let's play a private tournament right now.
Well,
done.
Then,
you know what I mean?
Then the thing is, though, with the ELO system that you're completely disregarding in your argument there is top tier players and people with high ELO want to be matched against other people who are the same level. And the ELO system helps to make that easier.
It does help to make it easier, but I also feel like we have that ability with private tournaments.
Yes, but not everybody has access to that. Now, you're speaking about a large pool of players, and they're going to want to actively be competitive, even if they're not investing as much time as, let's say, some of the bigger teams. I mean, I've seen that happen in video games. Like, take, for example, HON. It died due to the fact that the competitive scene was so difficult for players to get into. I mean, there were other exterior factors, but that was one of them. Like, it was really difficult to get into the competitive scene, and, well, ELO helps that a lot. And it helps, like,
it does. It kind of gives that arbitrary yardstick.
Yeah, it helps the actual regular player, get the competitive, whatever aspect of the game that he's looking to get. So, yeah.
I think a lot of it probably comes down to people just being lazy, too. Like, they'd rather just hit the Q button instead of seeking people out on their friends list and whispering them and be like, let's scrim.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is, I mean, looking at it from like a big team perspective, it's probably, we'd rather not grind rating or whatever because we have the ability to do that. But I could see that coming in as like a solo player and you want to have that competitive advantage. Like, what are you working for? Why are you being competitive? Because you're not getting anything unless you've got a team. And then without a rating, how would you prove that you are, available to play? I mean, think about like, you play WoW or whatever, you look at trade chat right now on any server, like you have to have X rating to play with this guy, like it's always like that. But I never personally really liked that kind of stuff. But I mean, like I said, maybe it's just me. I do see that is a good way to get people into the game and it's something to kind of work for. But at the same time, I just really don't like rating, grinding, camping.
I actually disagree with you. I love it. I find that it gives me something to do in the game. Especially, like, let's say if I don't have my whole team around, I can just, grind out my ELO, get higher. And it's a great way to meet other great players as well. I mean, it's really fun, and it's a system that's been proven to work, and it's very enticing, and a lot of people like it. And it's worked for a lot of video games.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with it.
It's a way that, like, unestablished teams could make it onto the scene kind of, too. Like, if the established teams are all just scrimming each other, these unestablished teams aren't going to ever get in on it. But in an ELO system, they can make their way to the top and then start playing the best teams.
One thing you guys mentioned, you said you guys would like to see team-based ELO. The one thing I'm concerned with, though, is it doesn't really fit into the current design that they have. I mean, right now, basically, you take part in these daily tournaments to qualify for the monthly, right? So, I mean, how does ELO fit in with that? Because the monthly qualifies you for the yearly. Is ELO just like another extra thing to look at, or does it actually factor into that system somehow?
Well, I would believe that they would have something similar to the first Guild Wars, which is like a ladder rank system, where, you get higher and higher up the ladder the more you win. And
well, so then who takes place in the monthly tournaments then? Is it the winners from the daily tournaments, or is it the people with the highest ELO?
No, I would believe it's the winners of the tournaments. So you would have the tournaments and then you would have the ELO. So basically, if you take part in the tournament, it means you want to qualify and play in the monthly tournament. But if you don't want to, you can just continue grinding out your rating, ranking, whatever you want to call it. ELO, if you will.
Okay, so it's basically just a number then at that point,
yeah,
right? It's just something to strive for.
Yeah, it's basically something for a player to grind out. Like PvP can get redundant if there's nothing to work for.
All right, yeah, I'm on board with that. I guess I can, yeah, I like that. Sounds good. So moving on, just had beta weekend 3 and the stress test actually. So, I mean, the game's pretty close to launching. I mean, I think we're, 20 days away from Head Start? Do you guys think that the game's polished enough to launch? Is it a good place right now?
Well, from what I saw in the beta weekend, I would actually have to say no. I don't believe it's ready for launch unless ArenaNet can pull off a miracle and, in time span between the beta weekend and launch. It's just so many things need to be polished, so many traits were broken, so many things need to be fixed, and I thought that their final beta weekend would be, a lot closer to a polished game than it was.
One thing I've noticed is that all the beta weekends kind of feel the same. Like, it doesn't feel like anything's drastically changed. Really, the only thing that I noticed that was implemented in beta weekend 2 that was different from the first one is the tournament system, which is obviously great, but, that was really the only real solid change that I felt, other than the trait tier system that they implemented that was kind of controversial.
Yeah, I just believe that there was so many things that weren't working that I thought, your last beta weekend should be something closer to the finished product than what ArenaNet gave us. And it's a bit worrying. I mean, I would rather they push back release and release a more polished game with everything working than, getting something half-assed.
Well, I could see that, but I think if they actually release the game now, it'll kind of put a fire under their ass. We need to get this done because everything is live and everyone sees these glaring mistakes. Like, the glaring bug with traits, everyone's going to be reporting it. It's kind of, it's public at that point.
Yeah, I know, but it could put off a lot of players from the game then.
That's true. I mean, I'm kind of actually going to be looking at the first month or two from release until Spectator, I guess, would maybe be a good cutoff as the open beta that we never got a chance to have that they drastically needed, in my opinion. I don't really think you can release a game that you are intending for esport with the balance problems that they've currently got. I completely agree with Xeph. I don't think it's ready for a release as an esports intended title. I think it's definitely a great game and it's ready for release in all the other aspects, assuming that all the content past level 30, that's all we got to see, I guess, in PvE wise or whatever. Assuming that stuff's good, I mean, I would say the game's ready to be released as a game, but as an esports ready product, I definitely don't see it being ready right now.
I agree with them pretty much, but in defense of Guild Wars 2, you could look at something like StarCraft 2's release, and if anybody is familiar with that, the Reapers for Terran were absolutely insane, and if the Terran played it right, a Zerg literally could win, and it was like that for at least 3 weeks. And since ArenaNet's not really planning on bringing out spectator mode or ladder or any of that stuff for a little bit, I don't think we can expect the best balance at the release. But maybe as this stuff gets released, by that time it'll all be balanced.
Yeah, but...
Well, I mean, there's going to be some OP builds or whatever, and everybody's going to be running it. But we'll just have to, use that stuff for now until the game is actually balanced.
I mean, going back to StarCraft, it's been out for quite a while now, and not too long ago, just a couple months ago, the Koreans officially recognized it as a game and switched over. So, I mean, that game was out for a while before the Koreans, which I guess are kind of like the all-saying god of StarCraft.
Well, GOM TV hosted it, but there's an organization called KESPA, which basically completely controls StarCraft 1, and they are just now picking up StarCraft 2 with a partnership with NLG and stuff.
But I think that's what I was saying. We'd have to consider the first couple months after launch as almost the open beta, kind of like you were saying with StarCraft, where they sat on it and there were some things out there. I mean, with an esports title, I don't feel that you can release an esports ready title. I don't think it's possible, and I think ArenaNet's doing the right thing by releasing the game now at the peak of the hype towards the end of summer. It's going to be the best thing for the game to get people in, to get people playing, which is what we need, obviously, for the game to be successful. And I think it's going to be a good enough game to keep people in. And as far as being able to release a balance-ready esports product, I don't really think that's possible. And I think we're going to have to just look at the first couple months as kind of the open beta.
I don't know. Personally, I believe that we should get another beta weekend to look at a more polished, closer to release game, because, I mean, what we got from beta weekend 3, you couldn't gauge really how polished the game is, just due to the amount of bugs that there were in the game, and a lot of things were broken, and a lot of things that we tested didn't work, and some traits, said they worked, but like when you tested it on the dummy, they didn't at all. So it just worries me because I just want the final beta weekend to be closer to the polished, format that the game will be releasing in, and beta weekend 3 really wasn't polished at all. So, I mean, that's just...
All right, you guys mentioned...
2 cents.
You guys mentioned balance a couple times. Was there anything that stuck out in Beta Weekend 3 or the stress test that was just really ridiculously imbalanced? I think Spirit Guardian build was pretty glaring, as was the Ranger Spirit build. How do you guys feel about that?
Trollhammer OP.
I mean, there were a lot of broken things. I mean... it would really depend. Like, if you were talking about, like, solo play, yeah, Guardian Spirit weapons were over the top. I mean, certain glass cannon builds were over the top. Elementalist needs a lot of retuning. As it is right now, it has too much utility and too much damage potential. It really does stand far and above the other classes, just in what it can do.
On the Elementalist, I am personally one of the biggest Elementalist haters. I think they've got way too much utility, and on top of their damage potential, they could even go into more of a tanky kind of healing build as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can run a team of 5 Elementalists and
is
be
out of control.
Successful. Like,
They
no
can do anything.
No question.
I think Ellie's main problem is just the amount of sustain they have. Like, if they run a tanky build, they have so much sustain, they can bunker 2 people forever, and they have crazy team healing and condition removal, tons of control. And then if you run glass cannon, you do just as much damage as any other glass cannon, but you can run from the fight with Ride the Lightning and still sustain yourself.
Yeah, you'll never die
because of how much healing. Like, that's the main problem with Ellie, is they just need to nerf the sustain of them. They have too much healing.
That's the thing, and you'll sit there in a fight with an Ellie, and you can get them dead, right? And then they're just misform, Ride the Lightning, reset the fight, and since they don't have any cooldowns, because they've got 4 different sets of what are those called? Attunements. Yeah, they got the 4 attunements. So essentially, they've got no cooldowns. All they've got to do is go out, hit their healing spells on the way back in. They're back at 3/4 to full health. You've blown everything trying to kill them, or you've blown more than they have, and all their stuff's back up. At least in 2 of the attunements, Like, essentially, that's my problem with Elementalists.
It's just too much utility available to one class and too much damage potential. I mean, some of their spells need to be toned down, or the attunement switching needs to be brought up. I understand that a lot of Elementalists will hate me for saying that, but either that or just absolutely nerf their arcane spells into the ground, because they just do way too much damage.
I'll agree that the damage needs to go down, but I love my 9-second attunement cooldowns.
But then if you take their damage down, then what role does the Elementalist really play? I don't know. It's such a weird thing having that much utility. They
like the main burst combo I use is I summon I use Scepter Dagger, and I summon the rock barrier with Earth, and then I hurl them. And as soon as I hurl them, I switch to Lightning, and that hits them with Lightning Strike. And then I use the regular Lightning Strike from being in Lightning. And since I do 10% more damage in Lightning, all those hurls do 10% more damage, and I'm channeling Lightning. It's a really strong combo, and it's only on a 15-second cooldown.
And you can still jump into fire.
Yeah, and
just for the overkill. And after that's over, jump back into Earth and Water.
After I do that combo, if I manage to get an updraft off, I can do like Phoenix Fire, grab arcane spells. It's a lot of damage.
So you guys think the biggest problem is with Staff Ellie or Scepter Dagger?
Ellie,
like
Ellie
which one is?
It's Ellie in general, because they can do almost anything.
It's not that, as
too
they
much healing.
fit every single role in the game at the moment. They can hold a node, they can roam, they can do damage. They're great team fighters. They just do everything.
Well, if you run Scepter Dagger, then you're a roamer, and if you run Staff, then you like sit on the point. Kind of. It's kind of dependent on the weapon.
Yeah, but I mean, still, like, the thing is, I'm trying to get at here is that you can have 5 Ellies, which means that Ellie can fit it 5 roles. Like, I can't make a Mesmer a roamer, because Mesmer just does not have the,
no mobility.
The mobility that an Elementalist has with Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, I think Mesmers just need help more than any other class, honestly. somewhere. I'm not sure where.
I don't know. I feel like Mesmers are all right. They've got their niche. I think they're really, really, really strong as a partner to another class, like a node holder. Mesmer can come in and definitely clear that out, as Xeph is pretty famous for. And then at the same time, I think Mesmers are really strong 1v1.
Well, I still.
But in team fights, they do kind of.
I think Mesmers
be useless.
do need help. I believe so. It's really difficult to get the damage off, unlike other classes.
Yeah.
We need to be in melee. We need to manage our illusions. Our illusions are so easy to kill. Like one arcane wave from an elementalist, when I'm spawning my illusions, they're all dead, and I have nothing to shatter. Then I just run around with my sword, spamming one, trying to spam duelists. And it's very difficult to keep up our damage, unlike other classes, like let's say an elementalist. Just spamming his arcane spells and, the one skill in air, the lightning channeling, plus the lightning strike. It's just so easy for other people to get damage off, and it's really, really difficult for a Mesmer.
So how would you want to improve Mesmer?
Well, for one, I would actually like them to make illusions harder to kill. I would like them to buff up shadow damage, because right now the damage isn't rewarding at all. I mean, the difference, if anybody here remembers the first beta weekend, the Mesmer then, the illusions did a load more damage, like probably 80% more damage on their auto attacks, and the Shadow did almost 100% more damage. I wouldn't want it to be quite as strong as it was in beta weekend 1, but I would like it to be at least 50% stronger, because as it stands right now, illusions do no damage at all, and Shatter does no damage at all, so we can't really utilize our class mechanic as we would like to.
I agree with you there, because beta weekend 3, they were terrible, and then beta weekend 1, I just completely ran away from you because it was a one-shot.
Yeah, them shatter bursts.
If you had your Signet up beta weekend 1, that was over.
I mean, the thing is, the class was meant to revolve around shattering and illusions, but it just doesn't seem to be that way anymore. If I have my duelist up now, I just wait for him to finish an unload and then shatter him, because it's just useless having him up in case he dies and I lose out on the damage. And it's a very weird class, and it's in a very weird place at the moment, because you're not really sure what to do most times and what's most effective. And certain shatters aren't worth it, because your duelist will be on cooldown, so your damage will be greatly reduced. If I want to daze a target, then I'm giving up a lot of damage by shattering the duelist that I just brought up and having duelist on cooldown for the next 15 seconds. It's just very weird. I think it needs a bit more help, or it needs shattering to be buffed, or illusion damage to be buffed. Nothing like the duelist in beta weekend 2, though, mind you. You don't want that sort of nonsense, but just a bit more damage.
Is it mainly the profession mechanic that you actually have a problem with then, instead of the actual weapon abilities and whatnot?
It is the profession damage. I mean, the sword is great, the pistol is great. Apart from that, the scepter is really subpar, and so is the torch. Really, we just have one effective weapon set. The staff's great as well. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah, your troll staff, I was going to say.
Yeah. The staff's great, but that's about
defensive.
it. You can see about 50% of Mesmer, 60% of Mesmer is running sword, pistol, staff. Because the other weapons suck. I mean, the greatsword does little to no damage. But yeah, I mean, this podcast really isn't about Mesmer. I could go on forever, so moving on.
There's plenty of professions to complain about.
Well, I mean, Phantaram's an elementalist. We kind of talked about them a little bit, and you're the token Mesmer. So, I mean, we don't really care about what Cigs says, anyways, about anything that he has to offer.
I'm just gonna complain.
Exactly. So, beta weekend 3, first time we were able to see Legacy of the Foefire. How'd you guys feel about that map?
I like it.
I'll let Xeph go.
Yeah, I like it. I don't think the Guild Lord is used very much, but it's surprisingly fun for having a secondary mechanic that you don't use very often.
Well, I think that's why it's fun, to be honest.
Yeah, that probably is.
It's fun because you basically go in and team fight the entire game, and it's mostly about controlling mid. If you lose the fight at mid, then it seems if you can't win a fight at mid, I don't think you could win the map.
I think that the secondary mechanic is meant to be a way around that. I mean, we personally didn't use it much. I think we used it once or twice, so my experience with it wasn't that vast. I mean, but there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it, especially using the Mesmer portal, having your Mesmer break down the doors, getting in there, creating a portal, importing your team in, giving the Lord instantly, and, surprising the other team. It can also help you by pulling people off nodes. Like you can attack the door and then have a portal behind you, and as soon as that team member comes, you can port back and have a 4v5 until that guy gets back to his teammates. It really does, bring in a whole different dynamic, and I really like it. I especially like the team fighting as well. I mean, a lot of action on that map.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I like team.
I literally never saw the Guild Lord engage, and if a team did actually go in for the kill on it, it was more like a big screw you. Your team's really bad, and we're ending the game quicker because we can. It was never like a strategic thing, like we're gonna kill the Guild Lord and it's gonna win us the game.
Well,
like if someone's killing the Guild Lord, it was always like the battle was in one direction.
It's really early, and a lot of people don't know what they're doing, and they don't have experience, and they're on there trying out their builds, and they're more interested in fighting each other than they are in actually really, really trying to win the match. I mean, people are just focusing on picking up the objectives, and it's just the secondary objective on that map seems really daunting, if you know what I mean. It takes a team effort to actually take it down, and not a single player doing it like, you have on Forest, or you have one player on Trebuchet and Kylo. It's more of a team objective, and it needs a lot more organization, and a lot more tactics are involved in it. So you won't see people using it now, but I believe in the future it will be used a lot more.
I think that map almost requires you to run a completely different build from the other two as well. I think you could have the same build for Forest and Kylo, but I don't see how you can have a Forest Kylo build and then go into that map and be successful.
Yeah, it does need a bit of, you need the classes.
I hate the map, personally. I think it just funnels it into a big fat-ass team fight in the middle the entire time. It reminds me of, some sort of old-school war song Gulch where, the flag's not touched and then everybody just goes mid and just mashes.
No, I don't know. I mean, I would have to disagree with you there. I understand the fight from mid is very pivotal on that map, but, I mean, there's a lot more strategies, I believe, that will be, brought forth when the game is released, and we get to experience that map more often.
I was gonna say, do you think it needs to change with the Guild Lord? Should it be easier to get inside the keep and harder to kill the boss? Should it be the same it is now, it's balanced, or do you think that mechanic is fine the way it is?
Well, I think the doors should be a bit easier to break down, because as it is now, no one can really break down those doors really, really extremely quickly unless you have quickness, and a lot of classes can't really bring it down. A lot of conditioned classes almost have no hope in breaking down the doors, so I believe the doors should be a lot easier to break down. And
what I was actually thinking about on that note is I was thinking maybe it should be instead of saying the door has 10,000 hit points, why not be 20 hits no matter what from that ability? 20 auto attacks from a certain class would take down the door.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great, but certain quickness classes would take it down far too quickly, I think. But
that's true. It's just looking for an even point, because I have tried to take those doors down on a conditioned engineer, and it takes forever.
Yeah,
it's literally
I would have suggested
ages.
letting the doors be vulnerable to conditions like bleeding, burning, and poison could do damage to it. Then that would be a bit more fair on conditioned classes being able to break it down.
That's a good suggestion.
Going back to how the Guild Lord can actually be used on that map, if it's a really close game and you're both at 400 points, there really isn't a reason to stay on the map and fight for the points. You could just go rush the Guild Lord as fast as you can and get 100 points and win right there. So we had that happen in maybe one or two of our games, but not very many.
How many games overall would you say that you actually killed the Guild Lord on, Phantaram?
Our team never killed it, but we had teams attempt to kill it against us, and we defended.
Was anyone ever successful?
No.
I think it's kind of a testament to the mechanic itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we killed it. We killed it twice, I think. Well, 2 to 3 times we managed to take it down. But it was just experimenting. We did try it with the portal, with the Mesmer portal, to see how it was, and that worked brilliantly. Having the portal in middle, and then porting on top of the Guild Lord, killing him, and porting back to middle, all in the same time. So, I mean, I believe that it does have potential for the future. I just believe it should be easier to have access to. And it can be used a lot as a gimmick to have somebody run off a point to go check on the doors, because once you attack them, it does tell the whole team you did. So let's say you're a very mobile thief, land a few hits on the door and then move off to a point, and you've successfully made it a 4v5 until someone, goes to check that and comes back. So there is potential.
In the future,
there is potential.
Yeah, in the future, people can find like specific specs that are really good at doing that kind of stuff. Like right now, I'm pretty sure Staff Ellie is really good against it. If you're on like a side point as a Staff Ellie by their base, and you're kind of just defending it, but nobody's coming, you can just step off to the side, drop a meteor shower on the door, and it will go down by one meteor shower and a lava font. And then you just kind of go back to the point and make sure nobody's coming. And then if you wanted, you could march back into the base, summon like your elite, like summon or whatever, to tank all the stuff for you, drop some more meteor shower and AoE, and just take out like almost all of them. And I think it's a pretty good spec for soloing the Guild Lord, really.
And that's Ellie for you.
I'm wondering if we're gonna have I'm wondering if we're gonna have the ability to know what map we're gonna go into to adjust our builds.
Actually, in that interview, they said that I'm pretty sure that the rotation will be it'll be static. They might change the order of them occasionally, but I think from what they said in that interview, the one mentioned earlier, is that you'll always know what map you're going into before you get there.
Like, how much time would we have, though?
I would assume probably just about as much as we do now. I mean, personally, I hope that they reduce the amount of idle time before matches, because waiting 5 minutes for a game to start can get kind of annoying, especially if you do it 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Personally speaking, I don't like the fact that you can change builds now and you can change your class before going into a match. I believe that should be changed. Like, you should be locked in. You can't leave that map, and you can't join in with any of your other characters. The only thing I think that can be changed is utilities. I believe being able to change utilities while in a match is really good. I like that, like, once you're out of combat, because you can, play around and you can pick up like really quick, easy counters while you're in the game.
We talked about this for a while on the previous podcast. So when you first load into the match and you're standing in the beginning area and the match hasn't started yet, you don't think you should be able to change your build at that point when you see the other team's comp?
No, I believe you shouldn't be able to change your build, because that's very, how can I say, it'll just become a whole counter game, if you know what I mean.
It gets a little build warsy.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, they said they were going to take a look at that, and they're basically looking for PvPers' feedback.
It'll also affect a lot of streamers. Like, if you stream constantly and then you load into that map and people know exactly what your build is, they can just go ahead and change theirs while they're sitting there.
Yeah.
That's true.
Streams.
Ghosting on Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just believe that you should have an all-purpose sort of build, and not people like specifically looking to counter each other and it becoming a whole, what do you think they're running? And you think I should run this? And so on and so forth. Like, it'd be just too much.
I feel like there should be some level of that, but I agree with you that it shouldn't turn into the entire game.
I believe that whatever build you start off your tournament with, or your tournament game with, is the same build you should end your tournament game with. The only difference is the utilities that you wish to swap in and swap out. It'll just become really tedious, and it'll bring a level of competition that people will find very aggravating, which is changing your build before every match. Like, personally, I wouldn't enjoy doing that.
Well, it's interesting, though, because, like, some builds are obviously better on certain maps. Like, bringing a Staff Ellie, like we discussed earlier, to Foefire is obviously really beneficial, but I would think that having Scepter Dagger would probably be better on Forest or Kylo. It just becomes, it's not as viable as running it the other way.
And I agree. I actually did that over the weekend. I would run Staff on Guilds, and then just switch over onto the others. For the Guild Lord map, I would run Staff and then Scepter Dagger on the other two.
So it's interesting, like I mentioned before, the developers are looking to take feedback from PvPers on that topic, because they haven't decided on their own. I think they're still wishy-washy on what the actual mechanics should be. So actually, you guys were on the show last week, obviously, so I kind of want your opinions. How do you guys feel about competitive Kylo? 5v5 Kylo.
I like it. I think it's the most polished one.
That's probably my favorite map, actually. I love that map as a Scepter Dagger Ellie. Like, when we like doing a fight in the mid and we like start winning the fight or something, and one of the side points needs help, I just like bust out the window and ride the lightning out the window to the point. It's so fun, dude.
That is my favorite MMO PvP map. Just straight up, like, I like it more than the Grand. That map is awesome. It's so fun. There's so much depth. Like, it's just a really great map. I think everything about that map is awesome. Adding the Trebuchet, there's a whole nother level to that map. I'm a fanboy of Kylo. I really think that is like the best thing that they've done with PvP so far.
Well, I don't want to give away you guys' strats or anything like that, but what are you doing at the very beginning? Are you sending one to their Treb to take it out, or are you ignoring it, or what are you doing with that?
It depends on really the team composition that you're facing, that you decide what to do, because, I mean, you can sort of gauge from what they have on what you're going to be engaged by. So let's say if you're on the Trebuchet, you can expect either an Elementalist or a Thief, depending on which one they have in the team, to be engaging you. And if the class on the Trebuchet has no ability to beat a Thief, then you might switch out the strat and say, okay, well, we don't want to utilize the Treb at the beginning. We're just going to have him cap the close point and have two of our members go take out their Treb and then switch out to the other points. And if our Treb's still up, then he'll use it again. And, we'll just work with how the map's going. So it really depends on the comp that you're facing on Kylo a lot of the times. And a lot of guessing.
I think competitive Kylo is really reactionary, like he's saying. Like, you've really got to be able to read what the other team's doing and how you're going to best benefit yourself in that situation. I don't think you can go in there and be like, okay, this guy's going here, this guy's going here. I don't really think that's going to be successful there. I think that's a really adaptive map.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we may have run the same openings, but as soon as we saw where they were running, we would always do something different. Like, we kind of had this consistent thing where we would send two to their Trebuchet to kill the guy, and then one guy would stay and kill it, and the other would roam off of it. But a lot of times, only one would go, because we'd see that they aren't sending anybody to defend or anything like that, so there's a lot of reaction going on.
Like, there's no surprise. Like, in Kylo, my role is very static. I hold Suicide Point. Suicide Point is basically the closest point to their spawn, because I'm, I think, the most durable DPS class there is at the moment. Just with the invuls, I can stand on point and not let them cap it until someone comes to back me up. Or, occasionally 1v1.
I really think the size and the way that the map is drawn out adds a lot to the strategy too, because, I mean,
it favors
like
roamers.
You were saying, he stands there.
It favors roamers.
Yeah,
Kylo does favor roamers.
I really think it does. Yeah, I think, like, just the amount of size it has and the way that the roamers work in the game, that you have really just enough time to hold that point for your roamer to get there.
Not only that, but like, it favors a Guardian standing in the middle more so than any map, because just the radius is so small, and the Guardian's knockbacks are so effective on that small point in the middle that a Guardian is really favored to hold the mid above any class, I believe.
The bubbles absorb the Trebuchet shots too. Yeah. It's absurdly powerful to put a Guardian mid.
It's a lot better than even, like, double Mace Warrior, like Mace Hammer Warrior. I've seen that tried, and it was not even near as good.
No, it's just every map in Guild Wars is different, and it really depends on what team composition you're facing.
All right, so what would you guys say your weakest map is? What's the hardest map for you guys to play right now? Like, even if you're winning constantly, do you struggle on any one of them?
Well, at the moment, I would believe Legacy of the Foefire, because it's the newest map, and it's the one we have least practice in. But also because we run very individual builds, and not really a team-based build. Like, each one of us runs a very individual build, because it's also, the game is in beta weekend, and it's in beta stages, and we're not really looking to, run OP team setups. We're more so looking to, record our own stuff and record it as a team and have fun and experiment with each individual class on its own. And eventually, when release does come around, then we can look into all the team abilities that we can be using together.
All right, how about you, Phantaram?
I think our best map is actually Legacy. My team just kind of concentrates on winning team fights, and then after we win the team fight, we get the secondary objectives. Like during BWE2, that was even our style on Forest. We would win fights, and then once we finally won the fights, then we'd go take the Forest creatures. Except at the start. We'd try to steal at the start. But yeah.
So what's your worst map then?
Probably Kylo. Even though it's our favorite map, it's just kind of like the tides can turn so quickly on that map if they get the right trebuchet shots off, or they repair without us knowing, or the roaming goes all wrong. It's the most difficult map and it's the most fun map. So,
all right. So we're gonna move on. Last topic of the podcast, and this is kind of a lot of people have been QQing about this lately. Power-based damage versus condition-based. I heard so much of the last beta weekend that condition damage is just too strong. Engineers, Rangers, especially that Spirit Ranger build, everyone was crying about that one. So how do you guys feel about that? Like, is power really weak compared to conditions, or how do you feel?
I don't believe so. I mean, it really depends, because with conditions and condition removals, it can be brought by other team members as well. I mean, a lot of team members can bring condition removal for their team. So in team fights, condition damage, its potency goes down really, really, by a lot, because let's say you have a Necro or you have a Mesmer. I can pop a null field and effectively remove all conditions on all my teammates. But in a 1v1 situation, let's say I'm playing an engineer, and engineers don't have a lot of condition removal. They're more vulnerable to it than, let's say, a necromancer who has many ways of cleansing conditions, or a ranger for that matter. So it really depends on the class. But I would say that I believe that condition damage is somewhat superior to power at the moment.
I agree. I think part of the problem is that they can put up so many different types of conditions that when you try to cleanse the important ones, like the bleeds and the burns, it's just so hard to get it off unless you're running some kind of super crazy condition removal, which is just not available at the moment for most classes.
So my next question was going to be if you guys thought that there was too much condition removal in the game or too little, but I guess that kind of answers the question.
No, I mean, I think it's, at the moment, certain classes need more condition removal than others, while others need it to be toned down. For example, Rangers need their condition removal really, really toned down. I believe Mesmers and Engineers at the moment need more condition removal than they already have. Like, effectively, I have a Mantra, which is useless, and then I have Null Field on a 45-second cooldown, which is also an offensive spell, because it removes boons, And so it's a really tough choice between saving that to cleanse conditions or using it to remove boons. And it's a 45-second cooldown, so it really depends. But I also believe that, power's also in a good place at the moment. It's just...
Yeah, I think power's in a pretty good place. Condition just needs toned down a little bit.
Yeah, because power really does have a static stat that works against it, which is toughness. So as a power build, you'll always have to deal with how much toughness your target has. While as condition, you can completely disregard that. And, it just depends on what class you're facing.
Condition at the same time, I think, has better sigils.
Oh, yeah. The Earth one is just so many bleeds so consistently.
Yeah, the Earth, even the air for condition's not bad, because the air does, 2-3k crits? A lot of your condition builds are going to be crit anyway, so...
Actually, I tested that over the weekend, and I'm pretty sure that air scales off of power.
It does scale off of power.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be that useful if you're running a condition build.
You could use Doom instead.
It's still gonna hit good. Even if it's scaling off of power and you have really low power, it's still gonna hit pretty good. As just an extra
hard
thing.
Not to take Sigil of Earth.
It is.
Oh no, you gotta take Earth. I'm talking about for the secondary. Earth is a no-brainer.
The thing is, I believe, in the near future, we're going to be seeing a lot more hybrid builds. I run a semi-hybrid build as a Mesmer with a lot of bleed stacking. Just because I believe that, even though I might meet a target with a lot of toughness, my bleeds can wear them down. It's very possible for me to get up to, 13, 15 stacks of bleeding, which each tick for 60 damage.
Yeah, I definitely think that balanced builds are going to be the way to go in the future. I mean, if you're running a full condition build and someone does get consistent cleanses off on you, you've basically been rendered useless. So, I mean, that's basically, you mentioned toughness being the counter to power, but obviously cleanses the counter to conditions. And if someone's able to cleanse your conditions, consistently enough, then you're completely useless. But if you're able to still put out some damage with some, low form of power, then you're still going to be effective, at least somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it works. I mean, high burst power builds with Earth Sigil, and like I run the sharper images, which means all my illusions that crit also bleed the target, and that's really great with the duelist unload. And I know that Necromancers also had a hybrid build using the axe. I know that was viable in the second beta weekend. I don't know how viable it is now since the Necromancer nerfs, but they could run power and effectively bleed the target a lot with their axe. Or, vice versa, they could run conditions and still do some form of power damage with the second skill on axe. So that
something that should be noted about hybrid builds is that might gives power and condition. So for hybrid builds, if you're gonna stack might, that could be super useful for something like that.
Yeah, and that was a change in Beta Weekend 3, right?
Yeah.
That's the first time they introduced that?
I think so, yeah.
That was an interesting change. Definitely makes might stacking viable for condition classes when it previously wasn't. If they decide to tone down conditions, would you guys rather see they alter the damage coefficients, like the actual damage they're doing on each tick individually, or would you rather see nerfs to the actual application?
I would prefer to see nerfs to the application and not the damage at the moment.
Yeah, like against Rangers, I remember seeing 25 bleeds on me, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta cleanse this, and I immediately cleanse it, and then like 2 seconds later, I have like 15 already back on me. It's like ridiculous application.
Yeah, I think a lot of that would probably be fixed if they added like an internal cooldown to Sigil of Earth.
That would be good. That's a great idea.
I believe they're aware of that, I think. I don't think anybody doesn't know how broken Sigil of Earth is at the moment. It's just
especially for Rangers with that retard build they run with the axes. Well, all you do is sharpening stone, and all right, press your 5, press your sharpening stone, and then throw your axes in melee range. Congratulations, 25. You just hit 25 bleeds. Like buff bleed, and then with the spirits, you've got enough survivability to just literally jump around in circles, derping until 2 comes back up.
Yeah, pretty much. You should write a guide, dude.
Really, buff bleed. There's your Ranger guide.
I don't know. I didn't think Rangers were as strong in Beta Weekend 3 as they were in Beta Weekend 2. I mean,
no, I don't think they were as strong.
I didn't really.
I think they've been toned down a little bit.
Any trouble with them?
I think they might not have been as strong individually, but the thing is that the Spirit build was much more popular. Like, I think I saw every Ranger that was running a build was running Spirit Ranger, and that was definitely one of the more powerful builds. And so I think it was just annoying because they were literally everywhere. If there was a Ranger, he was running Spirit build.
It's the most viable option. I mean, that's what they've kind of got to do at this point. I mean, the bows are atrocious. A lot of the other weapon sets, they've got potential. I personally love the one-handed sword. I think that's a great weapon. I just don't think it's as good. That's the thing. The Axe Warhorn is so good right now. You don't really have a lot of option when you're playing a Ranger. I mean, especially if you're going to be a competitive PvP player, like,
it's not option.
You've got to run what's the best.
Yeah, as you just said now, there will always be a weapon that's better than the others, and there will always be a build that is, better than the rest, and people will end up running that more so than none.
Okay, well, I gotta say, I tried Sword Dagger on Ranger, and that was retarded. It's not even usable. Like, you spend the entire time rolling around.
But you can see the potential of it, Like
if they
play
stand
these
still
weapons
AFK,
and you see the potential.
If someone AFKs and lets you kill them, maybe. But if not, like, you roll around the target with, like, their 2 key or whatever, or maybe it's 3 key, and you end up completely away from them. Like, you end up nowhere where you started. It was just...
Yeah, the sword definitely does take some getting used to because you do jump around a bit, but I still think it's got a lot of potential as a weapon. I love that. I love the weapon.
The damage was high. Don't get me wrong. The damage was really... I was actually impressed by the damage and how quick it was, but just, like, the abilities were just bad. They were not good.
I like the abilities.
One thing I think it's good for is bunkering. I believe the 2, 3, and 4 all have evasion on them.
And
so
poison.
If you're running a pretty tanky build, you can just evade all day with those with that weapon.
Yeah, you're just rolling around, literally. You're all around the map, just stacking poison on them and slowly wearing them down. I mean, I see the potential to it, but at the same time, why don't I just run buff, bleed and kill you?
Yeah.
The thing with me at the Ranger, I don't think it's overpowered. I think that it requires so little effort from the player to achieve such a... The amount of effort required for the result that you get is completely disproportionate with the Spirit Axe Warhorn build.
Yeah, that's a problem with a lot of the auto attack builds. There's the Guardian build that does like ridiculous damage just by spamming one with the scepter and the swords. Like,
Yeah, that just needs to go away.
it's crazy. Yeah, that kind of low skill stuff doesn't need to be in the game.
I believe that's all due to the Berserker's Amulet. I think the Berserker's Amulet needs another nerf.
Really?
Yeah.
I actually don't mind the Berserker Amulet that much just because you're so squishy if you use it.
I use it.
Like, 900, like you have like, what, 970 toughness or something like
You
that?
can really
don't you?
do a lot of fucking damage with it, though.
Yeah, I
You can.
use
The
it.
damage
I
output
use
is
it,
insane.
and you can actually fit it into a very survivable build. Now, the problem is a lot of people are throwing it around with, builds with low survivability. When people start catching on with a lot tankier builds and start throwing in Berserker's Amulet to do also large amounts of damage, then there will be, huge issues with that. I just don't like how that amulet works at the moment. It just seems to promote glass cannon builds, and that's what I saw mainly in the last beta weekend. Just everybody running glass cannon and trying to one-shot each other.
That's true for a lot of games, though. That's true for a lot of games. By and large, outside of the competitive scene, if you're just playing pub games as a regular player or you're just looking at that specific instance, most people, in my experience of many years, will run the most derpinest glass cannon build they possibly can for the dunks. That's it. I mean, that's going to be in any game you look at. Any game. In giant public forums, everybody's going to run the dunk build, no matter what.
I mean, you have games like Bloodline Champions, and they didn't have people being bursted down within seconds. It's just not fun to be killed without not being able to react. Like, I just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy an Elementalist ride the lightning, 2 arcane spells, and the lightning spell, the number 2 in the lightning, and then me being at 10%. It's just not enjoyable because there was nothing I could do to avoid that. Like,
it's like, congratulations, you pressed 4 buttons, I never moved, and now I'm dead.
I can dodge around like a monkey as they're coming in with their ride the lightning. But all they do is misform and run away. No, they'll misform. If they miss it, they'll misform, run away, and come back and try and do it again at a later time.
A later time? You're talking like 20 seconds later?
Yeah. When that's back up again.
Oh man, I missed. Be right back.
It's just, it's not fun. Especially for the player on the receiving end. I mean, a lot of people complained about the quickness, two-handed sword warrior just one-shotting people in the combo, and it's just, that sort of thing isn't fun for beginners. Like, people who are just being introduced in the game will not know what's going on, and will just get one-shotted over and over and over again. It's just not an enjoyable mechanic whatsoever. I don't
even
like that
playing
amulet.
those builds.
The Berserker's Amulet make those specs viable.
Impossible.
Yeah. It gives way for that.
They really do have to balance around those one spam builds too, though. I mean, even worse than getting one shot for me is literally watching someone one me to death.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that is attributed to that amulet because it is just an offensive DPS amulet. It's just for people that want to do large amounts of damage and just run around.
How much total crit damage is that? Is it like 15%?
25.
25 crit damage?
It's 15%.
I know the jewel itself has like 5%, doesn't it?
It's 15%.
Yeah, it's 15% on the amulet, 5%.
So 20%? Yeah, that's retarded.
So 20%.
And then that guardian trait gives 15% more for one-handers. It's ridiculous crit damage.
And they just run around one-shotting people. It's not enjoyable. It's not fun, and I don't believe it's how the game was intended to be played.
One of the ideas that me and my teammates came up with is just to tone down the stats on the amulets in general. Like, I don't know, take away like 20% of the stats on every single amulet. And it just kind of makes everything a little bit less that... Like, there's tanky builds out there that are ridiculous. people don't run them as much, obviously, because they're not going to destroy in a public match. And maybe everything just needs toned down a little bit.
I believe the stats should be spread out. Like, we should be able to spread out our stats more. So let's say we can have those jewels, the gems that we put in the amulets, throw away the amulets, and just be able to put those gems in gear. And that way we can spread out stats a lot more evenly and as we like. And instead of having that amulet with a mass amount of stats, be able to gem the gear.
I think that goes kind of almost against what they've been trying to do with a more simplified build system. I mean, to me, everything in Guild Wars 2 is about having all of the same shit from other games, but in a drastically simplified form.
Yeah, I mean but that's still simple.
For people just trying to jump in, I mean, looking at a character, you're like, oh, I have all this shit, and now I have to gem and gear.
Yeah, but
you know,
it's
like that gets a little overwhelming.
It's just gemming 5 armor sets. I mean, you cannot always give up simplicity. I mean, you need to balance out complexity and simplicity at the same time in order to stimulate players. Like, you can't just have everything be simple. You can't just say, here you go, here's your amulet. This amulet is if you want to one-shot people, and this other one is if you don't want to die. It can't be like that, because it's
well,
too
doesn't
stagnant.
It just turn into the gems in the slots being that way? Instead of just the amulet? Then
no,
you just,
but then
these are your one-shot gems.
It promotes people spreading out their stats. So let's say I'm running like a condition build. I can put in some healing, put up my damage, just not have as many stats as there was present on the amulet, but be able to put more things in. So I can pick up like that one gem that gave me everything to all stats and maybe increase my crit damage a little there. And it will bring in a whole different playing field than just having
I gotta disagree with you.
mass.
9 out of 10 games that are like that, it's gonna be a stat stacking. You never really see a stat spreading in a theory craft. You always want to stack certain things. It's more beneficial to stack than spread.
Well, I,
mean,
don't
it's
think
gonna be
there's
like
any
that.
game with condition damage as in Guild Wars, and not every game had people being able to heal themselves, everybody having self-heal. We're talking about a different format game here. And I believe the spreading of stats in Guild Wars is a lot more effective than just massing up one stat. Like, I saw hybrid builds. I think hybrid builds will be a lot more successful in the future. I mean, you can look at the warrior's sword as well. I mean, it has a lot of condition damage on top of being viable as a power-based weapon. I just believe it'll be more interesting than having these, beefed up amulets, that have people, steroided up amulets that let you crit for 10 million and one-shotting people. I just really dislike that.
I agree with you. The amulet really is a lot, but I don't know if spreading it drastically to gemming all the gear is maybe the way to go.
Well, it'll just be gemming up 5 armor sets. It won't be much different.
Well, why don't they just let you use rings and earrings and all those other gem slots and stuff that are the jewelry slots instead of
so
you know
be
what I mean?
it. I mean,
Well,
gemming
like-
or that.
like
It's
you
the
mentioned
same
before.
thing. It'll just be like putting runes on your armor,
Yeah.
except you're putting gems now. I mean, it's not like that system isn't already present in the game. You're already putting, rune sets on your armor.
I personally with Phantaram on this one, I think if they just nerf the stats on the amulets just slightly, I mean, all it's going to do is raise the time to kill, and that's what we're really complaining about to begin with. I mean, condition damage would be down, power damage would be down. Maybe leave the vitality stat the same.
Yeah, well,
maybe
that's
just nerf the
what I
actual
was about to
damaging
say.
stats.
Like, all the defensive stats will go down, so effectively it'll be the same.
Yeah, it'd be the same. Yeah, so leave the vitality the same.
Well,
Then it'll promote people not
I don't
dying.
think
like to
other
see-
glass cannon builds would get one shot as hard. Like, when it's glass cannon versus glass cannon right now, you both just, either you one-shot the other guy or the other guy one-shots you. But I think if all the stats on, say, if you both were using a Berserker's Amulet with 30% less stats on it, I don't think you would both just one-shot each other immediately. While it would still be around the same when a tanky amulet player plays against a Berserker's Amulet player. It would be about the same, but when there's 2 Berserker Amulets player playing against each other, it would be a little bit different.
I like the decreasing the damage and keeping the tankiness the same and then raising the time to kill. I think that's
I
probably the way to
completely
go.
disagree with that, because then just tank builds would be buffed up a lot, while damage builds will be left behind. In that case, you're talking about the bulk of stats now, which is the amulet.
Yeah, now I'm trying to think of a Sheen with buff defensive stats and everybody else with less damage.
Just people would not die anymore. The thing is, I believe that stats.
I hate playing him as it is.
You should be able to spread them out. I just believe spreading them out will change a lot of things. Sure, you can say people are going to run pseudo berserker amulets, but I believe that it'll bring in a whole different level.
So you're saying here's what I think you're saying. Tell me if I'm right, and I will agree with you if you're saying, you know what I mean? So here's what I think you're saying. I think you're saying that, yes, go ahead and, let the pseudo berserker build be viable, but make it to where if you play smartly and spread your stats out correctly, that you can outskill a derp build.
It's not that per se. Like, let's say, what's the biggest flaw of the berserker amulet at the moment?
The crit damage.
Yeah, ridiculous amounts of damage.
No, as in, what stops it from being perfect?
Oh, it just doesn't have the HP and stuff.
You would trade the vitality for more precision.
The lack of toughness on the amulet itself. There is no toughness. So you can bring down your damage of that berserker's amulet if you're allowed to spread out your stats in favor of getting more toughness. Like, I could see myself doing that. I would bring down my damage just to have a bit more toughness. And a lot of people will be doing that.
What about splitting the stats? What about splitting the stats evenly between amulet and jewel? Instead of, like, right now the jewel is really just, it's still obviously a good benefit, a good addition, but it's not.
But it would depend on the split.
Like, maybe divide it in half.
Yeah, well, half is too much. Then I would still run berserkers.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Arena's objective here, like Cigs mentioned earlier.
You keep 40% on the amulet, and you give the player access to the other 60% to spread out among his jewels. Then, yes, then it could work because I could have a decent amount of toughness from that. I could get probably 200 toughness off that and still keep, a moderate amount of damage. So I'd much rather see the gems, like the rings and whatever, the earrings come back, and that's, maybe spread it out like 10-10-10 on them. I don't know, 20-20, whatever.
I'm curious if we'll see those come back. I'm pretty sure that the slots were still there at least in the last beta weekend. Did they adjust the stats on the amulets when they removed the rings? Did they change those at all, or is it just a straight reduction?
I don't know. I think they buffed them up. Especially, they also added the jewel, which is, I think, equivalent to the amount you were getting from the rings and stuff.
Gotcha. All right. So we kind of strayed a little bit from here, from the main topic. Do you guys have anything else left to say about power versus condition or anything like that? Anything left to add?
No.
No?
I think we're good there.
We're good.
All right. Well, then I guess we're kind of running along here. So I guess we'll just go ahead and wrap it up right here then. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. As always, go ahead and like the video, por favor. Also leave a comment down below. Again, big thanks to my guests today. Obviously, Cigs, my co-host, will always be here, unfortunately. And with us today, we also had Xeph. We also had Xeph from Team Paradigm, and we also had Phantaram, new addition to Team Paradigm NA. So big thanks to these guys for sticking around. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
You guys were wonderful. Welcome back anytime.
All right, and that's it.
See ya.